Hearty shalom to you, Jeffrey Seif here. Thanks for going with me on the journey and with us through the Tree of Life Bible Society. You know, we're all about wanting to look at the good news through the eyes of the Jews and tell it not just to the Jews, to the world. And I'm glad you're interested. We're looking in the book that's called Acts in the New Testament, the 13th chapter, and Paul is giving a speech. And I'm interested in his speech, in part, not just to observe what he's saying, but to alight upon what's lacking, that is, by imitation, in so much of Christianity today. Paul is speaking, if you look in verse 16, men of Israel and God-fearers, listen. He's speaking to Jewish people as well as God-fearers, these individuals of non-Jewish extract who are attracted to things Jewish and that are there to get a hearing. In the synagogue, we're told in verse 15, actually, to go up a little bit, Paul has a guest appearance in a synagogue, and we're told after the reading of the Torah and the prophets, the synagogue leaders sent to him saying, "Brothers, if you have any word of encouragement for the people, speak." Paul was a Pharisee, a member of the Parushim, and he wore the garb, and they knew he was a visiting scholar, and they gave him an opportunity to share. And Paul then in verse 16 gets up in motions and speaks, men of Israel and God-fearers, very respectfully. He's addressing Jewish people. Right off the bat, I want to underscore there is no address to Jewish people relative to the gospel in the Christian world today, or very little. Minuscule. There are Christian people who kindly invest energies in support of the state of Israel. They send monies to organizations that want to show Christians standing behind Israel, and indeed I am, and we are pleased by that. But in terms of presenting a message, a culturally sensitive message, that's not what's really coming out of that camp, save the fact they're testifying with the language of love. And again, I don't want to minimize that, but here it's not tacit, it's not inferred grace, it's explicit. If you look in verse 26, brothers, sons of the family of Abraham, and those among you who are God-fearers, it is to you this message of salvation has been sent. By the way, Paul is referring to the Jewish community as my brothers, and elsewhere my elders, my leaders. He understands himself. He was the father of Christianity, so-called, understand himself to be part of the Jewish world. He goes on to say, those who live in Jerusalem and the rulers didn't recognize who Jesus was. He localizes the problem, as opposed to today, it's just assumed, well, all the Jews rejected Jesus, so Jesus rejected all the Jews. That's just a jaded telling of the biblical witness. Jesus came and was wildly accepted by the Jewish masses in Jerusalem and elsewhere. This invoked the ire of the religious leaders. We see that as we read on later into the chapter. This rank and file enthusiasm for Jesus prompts the need to get this movement in check. And it's that conspiracy amongst the religious elite to snuff out the Jesus movement that facilitates Jesus' demise, as opposed to just the wholesale, Jewish abandonment of Jesus, as is the mythic telling of the story in the modern world. And the story that's been passed down, the Jews rejected Jesus, Jesus rejected Jews. We're told then in verse 32, to move on a bit, we proclaim to you good news. The promise to the fathers has arrived. That is not the message to the Jewish people that ekes out. The message to the Jewish people that ekes out from the church is you're a jaded, condemned people because you condemned Jesus to death. This author, Paul, says that the leaders facilitated his demise, but we proclaimed to you the good news that the promise to our fathers has arrived. That's the understanding. And by the way, if you look in verse 33, for God has fulfilled this promise to the children, to us, by raising up Yeshua, by raising up Jesus. This, by the way, is so fundamental to what the Tree of Life A Bible Society is all about helping people see that God has fulfilled the promise to the Hebrew people. It's a gracious telling, it's a generous telling, it's a kind telling. No one is bent on casting aspersions on Jews for not getting it. To me personally, I think it's a miracle when any Jewish person accepts Jesus. That's the God's honest truth. When I consider all the history, all the anti-Semitism, 2,000 years of bad blood, I think it's amazing if any Jew prays to Jesus, to tell you the truth, because the church just really has a black eye, and the relationship has been horrible, and that's just so very, very tragic. Here, I'm not looking to criticize the Jews. I'm not even looking to criticize the church. I think it's better to light candles than it is to curse the darkness. And the Tree of Life Bible Society is all bent on wanting to sow the connectivity that the promise of the fathers is fulfilled in the presentation of the Son. And I should say, by the way, at the risk of sounding personally self-serving, not just for the Bible Society itself. The translation, the Tree of Life translation that I'm working from, was a joint effort. Everyone pitched in, and there was a whole process behind that we could then tender a translation. When it came time to do a reference Bible, to stitch it together, that principally fell on my shoulders. And when I'm looking at the references in this Bible, I went through and approved them and attended to that. And what was on my mind principally was to show the connectivity. I wanted people to be able to read the New Testament and go back to the Old, and I wanted people to be able to read what we call the Old Testament and push forward to the New. I wanted to underscore that people could see how the promise of the fathers comes together. For my money, when I look at the Tree of Life Bible, it's not just a version that's Jewish friendly and that speaks to the needs and interests of the day. It's not just that. And it's not just a translation that sets up with introductions to the books to give a window into the background and the essence and substance of the text in the respective biblical books. But it's the stitching between the testaments, the going back and forth, that is I don't want to say it's a distinguishing characteristics, because other translations certainly do it. But it's something I know when I looked at it, I wanted to particularly work those cross-references in a way that's very, very Jewish friendly. In order that, if you look in verse 38, let it be known to you, brothers, that through this one is proclaimed to you the removal of sins, including all those from which you could not be set right by the Torah of Moses. I wanted people to be able to see that there's a new day dawning, and with the whole referencing system in the Bible. And then lastly here, moving on down to verse 42. As Paul and Barnabas were going out, the people kept begging them to speak these things to them the next Sabbath. They presented something in a way that that spoke to people's hearts, and they wanted to learn more. And it's my hope that through this, that you're interested in it because you're watching the video. And I would imagine you might have made some financial sacrifices to help facilitate it. It's all with the mind to help bring people near. Well, thank you for giving me a hearing. We'll pick this up again, same time, same station in a week. God bless.